told her to, quote, kill the people.
From her voice, she said that she was trying to kill them?
Yeah.
There was lots of people, screaming, yelling.
What was that you just said?
I hear voices in my head telling me to do it.
Telling you to do what?
To kill people and to kill myself.
February 22nd, 2022 was a typically sunny day in Stuart, Florida, but as diners were enjoying an outdoor lunch at a Fresh Market grocery store, the unthinkable happened. Out of nowhere, a black Kia Forte came speeding into the crowd, slamming into multiple civilians before driving off. The incident left 4 victims seriously injured and 1 in need of airlift to a local hospital. After being followed by a witness and a short chase, police apprehended the suspect. But who she is and the shocking reasons for her crime are just as tragic as the crime itself. The suspect is identified as 31-year-old Beatrice Bijou, who freely admits to officers a desire to jump off a bridge, as well as her heavy medication regimen to treat bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. But another shocking revelation will explain her actions even further. Beatrice is taken into custody. By this point, the officers know she deals with various mental health issues and has been off her medicine. But what they didn't know was they were about to endure one of the most unsettling interrogations they had ever encountered. The detective is kind and respectful, speaking to Beatrice with a calming tone. As she's already confessed the crime, there's no need for traditional interrogation techniques. The main question now is why did she do it? But before they get to that, she'll have a curious request of her own. Her phone, so she can delete her social media. It would appear to be an odd request, but the reasons will soon be made shockingly clear. Beatrice's behavior up to this point has given the detective every reason to believe she's lying about her profession, but fact is often stranger than fiction. It's hard to imagine the confident attorney in this ad is the same woman sitting in the interrogation room, calmly admitting to attempted murder. But throughout Beatrice's many achievements, extreme mental illness was waiting in the wings, ready to tear down everything she'd built, and forever altering 4 other lives in the process. Beatrice Bijou was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and excelled in high school, earning a 5.4 GPA. After receiving her Doctor of Law from Nova Southeastern College, she worked as an associate attorney before founding her own personal injury law office. She would win significant court cases against multiple corporations and secure over $500,000 in client compensation. But now she's caught in a spiral of mental illness, a fact she's all too frighteningly aware of. Beatrice calmly states her medical history, claiming multiple hospital visits and attempts at her own life in the recent past. She lists multiple medications used to combat her conditions, which include schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, the combined symptoms of which are known as schizoaffective disorder. She hasn't spoken to her psychiatrist in months and offers a curious reasoning as to why she's been skipping her doses. While Beatrice's continued drinks of water and heavy breathing could be a sign of nervousness, there are also symptoms of an ongoing acute schizophrenic episode. She claims to have taken her medication that morning, but struggles to remember a time before that. Symptoms of bipolar disorder may include impulsive decision-making, grandiosity, and thoughts of ending one's life. Combined with the disordered thinking and delusions of schizophrenia and stress of running a law practice, Beatrice was nothing short of a ticking time bomb. Hallucinations or experiencing senses that don't exist outside one's mind is a common symptom of schizophrenia, often manifesting in hearing voices. While sometimes pleasant, patients often describe these voices as crude, cruel, critical, and abusive. But in Beatrice's case, they're much worse. Beatrice claims the voice she hears is demonic in origin, which prevents her from speaking about it further. Research shows that when a schizophrenic patient is hearing voices, their brain records actual changes in the areas controlling speech. In other words, these voices are as clear to the schizophrenic mind as an everyday conversation is to a normal one. Beatrice impulsively moved to Dallas, Texas in 2020, where she was twice treated for mental health emergencies. She moved back home to Stuart in 2021 to be cared for by family, where thankfully, her brother confiscated a handgun. Jake Afans, that Beatrice is referring to, will also be questioned by police. His initial defensive tone with the detective will quickly change when he hears of her alleged crimes. Jake states that he and Beatrice met 2 months prior on a Facebook dating app and immediately became engaged after their first date on New Year's Eve. Impulsive behavior is a symptom of bipolar disorder, and the sudden engagement may have been an example of this on one or both their parts. While schizophrenics do have an increased tendency towards violence, they're by and large peaceful, and if properly medicated, live normal, fully functioning lives. Instead of answering the detective's question about the events of Beatrice's day, Jake jumps from topic to topic, perhaps suggesting nervousness or the same scattered thinking his fiancée is suffering from. Jake claims that after working over 100 hours a week, Beatrice suffered a nervous breakdown and began hearing voices. A nervous or mental breakdown is typically thought of by psychiatrists as a period of strong anxiety and depression associated with a particular event, not 3 years of acute schizoaffective episodes. Earlier, Beatrice stated that while she did stop taking her medication when visiting Jake, it was only for a couple days. Jake is now claiming that she'd visit him for up to 5 days at a time, more than enough to trigger her brain into another psychotic episode. Another symptom of Beatrice's schizoaffective disorder is insomnia, which Jake also confirms she'd recently been experiencing. Jake states that in the 2 months he and Beatrice have been together, they'd spent $500 on Plan B, or the morning after pill. He also claims to have felt obligated by his faith to marry her, and her desire to have children led to her going off her medications. Jake finally gets around to telling the detective the last time he talked to Beatrice, and it would appear they have a very close relationship. They share each other's location using the Find My app, and he calls her up to 5 times a day reading passages from the Bible. The behavior Jake describes is clearly controlling and possibly manipulative. It's obvious to the detective that this isn't the healthiest of relationships. After another detective enters the room and the conversation turns towards his own dating history, a disturbing pattern emerges. As well as having similarly volatile relationships in the past, Jake reveals even more serious skeletons in his own closet. Jake confesses past issues with substance abuse and an arrest for domestic violence against his father. But he also claims that he had no idea Beatrice was on medication until recently, and in his eyes, her actions are totally unforeseen. The eccentric Jake doesn't appear to be directly involved in Beatrice's crimes, but thankfully is still seeing a counselor for his many problems. He's free to leave, and now that Beatrice's siblings have arrived, they'll paint a much clearer picture of their sister's life. Beatrice's sister Tessa backs up Jake's claim about her mental health episodes in Texas, and also informs police that she's her primary caregiver. Based on her years of experience with Beatrice, it seems history is repeating itself in the most tragic of ways. Tessa tells police that Beatrice was planning on leaving law to study nursing, but her frequent mental health episodes prevented it. Like many other physical ailments, mental illness is genetic, and just as doctors use family history to solve medical mysteries, law enforcement use them for criminal ones. Tessa again states how unusual this behavior is for Beatrice, but when she asks where her sister will be placed, she can't hide her disappointment. But accepting the situation, her concern shifts to the victims. Beatrice continues to show symptoms of an acute schizophrenic episode, including excessive thirst, confused thinking, nervousness, and abnormal movements. As Beatrice is left alone, her symptoms become even more extreme, as she begins to shake so badly she can barely hold the water. But when the detective returns, she abruptly changes her mind about her phone. Once again, Beatrice can't cope with being left alone. Her delusions are likely causing extreme psychological distress that the detective's presence momentarily distracts her from. The detective likely understands that Beatrice is suffering a serious mental health emergency. He calmly repeats his statements with compassion and patience, attempting to make this process as painless as possible for her. Beatrice has already stated several times her intent to murder her victims. Luckily for her, the detective tells her that the state attorney isn't interested in pursuing those charges, no matter how much she wants them. This is more evidence of the scattered thinking common with schizophrenia, and what happens next will be the consequences of it. Beatrice will now be charged with attempted murder, but the behavior she exhibits throughout the rest of her detainment will go a long way improving her mental state. The Baker Act is used by families to provide emergency mental health services and temporary detention for loved ones. Beatrice had been Baker Acted multiple times since being diagnosed with her disorders. After Beatrice yet again asks to go on record, she confesses that health insurance is the real reason she stops taking her medication for months on end. True or not, it's a damning indictment of the American healthcare system. The detective implies now that Beatrice is in custody. Her medication will be paid for by the state of Florida. The irony appears lost on him. As detective and suspect speak of their future travel plans, which for Beatrice may never come, we're left with a painfully human moment. Beatrice Bijou was charged and pleaded not guilty to 1 count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, 1 count of high speed or wanton fleeing, and 4 counts of attempted murder. She was immediately disbarred by the Florida Supreme Court. Beatrice was remanded to a mental health facility where she is now undergoing treatment. Mental illness is a particularly tragic disease, often finding people at the height of their lives only to drive them to their lowest. But as the case of Beatrice Bijou shows, mental illness never only affects the afflicted.